So now I should get a notification that it's being recorded. I'm going to share my screen real quick. I'm going to go over the research proposal. Okay, so here's just a recap of the requirements. It's just a copy paste of the requirements for essay 2. This is the genre 2 of the essay 2. Um, so these are all the necessary items that you should include in your research proposal. Um, Again, based on our research proposal, based on our submissions, it seems that some of you didn't complete all of it. So there are still items missing. Although it was supposed to do today, I'm gonna give you a 2-day extension so you can still modify or resubmit your proposal by this Wednesday. And at that time it would be graded and it would count towards 5 point uh, of your entire project. So entire project would be 30 points. So the proposal would be 5 points. So that means 5 points in your total, in your final score. Okay. So the necessary components. So these are all the necessary components in this assignment. So you should follow this closely for anything that's absolutely needed. Okay. So for things that people usually do in the research proposal in general, it usually starts with an abstract. It's okay if you don't have an abstract, but if you do, and I encourage you to have an abstract, it's just a condensed version of your entire thing. Okay, so one sentence corresponds to one section in your research group, in your research proposal, right? So you could have one sentence that just opens it and that talks about the status quo of the field, the background, the context, etc. And that's just your introduction or a literature review. In another section, you talk about your methodology, what's new about your approach, what's new about your tooling, what's new about your strategy. There's another sentence that corresponds to the agenda or timeline. And finally, you should have one sentence that talk about your goal or the impact of your research. So that's abstract. If you don't know how to write the abstract or you haven't written an abstract before, it's okay if you don't include an abstract in your research proposal for this assignment. But in general, abstract is something that people can just take 10 seconds or 30 seconds to look at and decide whether it's relevant, whether she is going to keep reading. Right. So introduction is a necessary part of a research proposal. And as a matter of fact, it's a necessary part of any research-based or research-oriented writing. So the introduction should entail, first of all, the status quo of the area, the topic, and the context and the background. So what research has been done, uh, what research is left to be done, and more importantly, why would I care? So you should gently guide your audience into the question that you're studying, right? So your targeted readership should be slightly larger than your targeted readership of your entire paper. So if your entire paper is meant for those handful of people who really understand your question and who really care about it, introduction is the last chance where you can tell the rest of your reader that, okay, what is this about and how I can get you interested in this very specific area, right? So be gentle in your introduction. Don't introduce too much jargon, too much new concept that people might be unfamiliar with. So also, I find it so this is not a guideline. This is just a rule of thumb of mine. I find it very helpful when you provide a statement of your research question or hypothesis in your introduction. It could be the starting sentence of any paragraph, or it could be the concluding sentence of any paragraph. But please just include a statement clearly. What is my research question? What I'm studying, or what is my hypothesis in your introduction? So you have the choice of splitting your literature review into an independent section, but you you also have the choice of just doing it in your introduction, right? So this is sort of an integrated part of your background or status quo or context uh, section. So recognize other scholars in this field, recognize their opinions, arguments, what has been studied, what has been said, and more importantly, what is left to study. Okay. Uh, so after introduction, you should also have a goals section where you talk about what will be done, what would be done in your research, right? So, and most of the time, people also talk about what influence will this research make. So this is sort of similar to the border impact that many of us now including in our research papers and research proposals. But this is not, this is completely optional, right? You don't have to say this in the independent statement, but you should always consider what influence of this research will have on the readership and on the society maybe, and you should incorporate that into a research proposal. So the meat of the research proposal is the methodology. So everything else is the salad or the broccoli you eat before or after a steak, and the steak is your methodology. So here we're not asking you to write in detail about this, but you should at least have a a sense, or you should at least write about what kind of methods you are going to using, what kind of sources there you're searching for, or what kind of a design you do for this specific project, etc. And lastly, it's the agenda and timeline that matters, right? So most of the time you are given a certain amount of time. Usually it's a very tight timeline. So you have a deadline, and sometimes people will give you a little bit of money to do this, and you'll have to tell them how you're going to spend this money. So research is so most researchers spend more time writing research proposals than writing papers, because they're all busy trying to get their projects funded. And it's always a good sign if you have a very concrete timeline and agenda, so that I understand and the reviewers will understand how to use your time and money and resources, etc. But of course we're not giving you any money in this specific project. Okay, so there are a few examples that we don't have time to talk about today, but the second one is my oh, actually the third one is my favorite one. So it has comments on each section, and it's very clear. I highly recommend you to take a look after class, and also have attached a research proposal that I wrote that got funded. Uh, it has, well, we can just take a look at the structure. It has an abstract and introduction, a significance, and approach. So approach is just another way to say methodology. And I have some preliminary results, and I tell them what they should expect, right? So give me your money because it's promising. All right, so I'm gonna stop share. I'm gonna stop recording. So we're gonna use the 8 minutes that remain to to. All right, so I'm resuming this recording, and perhaps you couldn't see it here, but looks like everybody has gone. So I made a stupid mistake that I didn't record for the first half of the class. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm just going to briefly and very quickly go over the first half of the class, and I hope this you can refer to this video as a supplementary material for the first half of the class. All right, so for the first half of the class, what we did uh, is that we looked at what defines a good research question. So we started with a small exercise, which you can which is linked on the the index page of our class website. And it's an exercise to distinguish good research questions from bad ones and from those who are not even research questions. All right, so so if you're watching this at home, so in general, 1 to 4 is horrible, evidently, and 6 is debatable, right? So it leads you somewhere, it leads you to do some sort of research, but it's still too broad, right? My favorite research questions are 8, 9, and 10, and we'll talk about this in a bit. Why these are the best ones or my favorite ones. Okay, so the guidelines, the theoretical guidelines for a good research questions could be summarized as follow. So it's basically three aspects: the scope, the feasibility, and the impact. So these are not independent; these are interchanging. Those are, I'm sorry, interconnecting, right? So if you go too far in one direction, it might limit you in another. So the scope means that how big the research question is, right? Feasibility means that can you do it, and impact means why would I care. So for scope, you should pick your research question so that it's wide enough, so that it's relevant. If you look at our examples are here. For example, if you just look at number 4, how much does a latte cost in a coffee shop somewhere? Well, you can actually study this, right? You can actually go there and solve this problem. But this is the scope of this is so limited. On the other hand, if you look at 7, then you're asking this on the scale of the human body, which is a very complex system, very sophisticated system. The scope is too large, right? It's not measurable, it's not it's not characterizable. So a good scope should be broad enough so that people would care about this, so that it's interesting, but it should also be narrow enough so that you can get your hands on it. All right. Feasibility means that you have the necessary means and resource and time to work on this problem. There are many problems that are interesting, but it's impossible to solve. For example, if you look at um, number 5, what kind of coffee did Shakespeare drink? There's probably no material on this one. It's very hard to study this, right? So it's not feasible. And finally, the impact means that it should be impactful or influential enough so that it will concern a real and debatable issue. The results of your potential research has to be interesting to others. By interesting, I mean that it could perhaps improve a certain aspect of a way of life of some community, or it could further the understanding uh, of a specific area, etc., etc. So it should make an impact. Okay, so these are interconnected. So if your scope is too large, your impact might go up as well, right? So you might have a larger impact, but your feasibility is limited. You probably wouldn't be able to finish your research within a year, 2 years, or even your lifetime, right? So if your scope is too narrow, your feasibility is up, right? So if you're only there to find out how much does a latte cost in a specific shop, I mean, it's doable, right? The scope is narrow, so that's doable, but also it's not that interesting. It will have very little impact. Right? So these are all interconnected. So, but if you ask how much the latte cost, or how much does the price of latte change with regard to time, or how does the price of a latte distribute with regard to location, that becomes a very interesting research question, right? As a matter of fact, I don't know if you guys know this, but a bottle of Coca-Cola costs almost exactly same in New York City, in Alabama, in Texas, in California, or in Zimbabwe, in China, in Taiwan, or in Cambodia. So across the globe, it doesn't matter where you are, a bottle of Coke is almost the same amount of money. A Big Mac from McDonald's, however, varies very dramatically. Because it's, I don't know, $3, $4 here. It's a lot cheaper in China. It's a lot more expensive in Switzerland. It's the change is so interesting, so that it's actually a very good indicator of the economic or socio-economical environment of a region or a country. So this is called Big Mac Index. It's very interesting. I encourage you to look at your own leisure. It's correlated with it's correlated with some measure of the region's uh, economy. So yeah, you can easily change a research question from a narrow scope to a larger scope, but I I almost always found it the case that our students would be more prone to ask big questions that are not feasible, right? So always ask yourself: is your research question feasible? Is your research question, is the scope just right? All right. So this is the first half of the class basically, and I should refer you to this web page for a more detailed instruction of finding, of brainstorming, finding, and then honing your research question. All right, so that should cover the first half of the class. My apologies again that I forgot to record, but I hope that the, the, the few minutes should have already summarized our first half of the class. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me or Slack me. Thank you.